Why do kids with ADHD appear to like to argue so much? The reason I wanted to make this video is because my most watched video ever on YouTube is a video about ADHD and arguing. So this is obviously a topic that people search for. So I thought that it was important to understand why it appears kids with ADHD like to argue so much, with the intention that hopefully you will understand why your child may have a propensity to be argumentative and what you can actually do to reduce the argumentativeness as well. Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in ADHD, a former school social worker, and my most important job is I'm a father to a son with ADHD who happened to be a highly argumentative and oppositional child, and now is a full functioning young adult who's doing pretty well in life. So there's not one reason why kids with ADHD appear to like to argue. There's quite a few reasons. So let me break them down for you. The first thing I want to explain to give some context to this video is that I consider ADHD to be an executive function developmental delay. What that means is a child with ADHD, their executive function skills are developing approximately 2 to 3 years behind their same age peers. For individuals who do not have ADHD, their executive function skills are finished developing around age 26. For an individual with ADHD, their executive function skills are finished developing around age 28 or 29. So because ADHD is an executive function developmental delay, somebody's executive function age doesn't necessarily match their chronological age. Furthermore, their executive function skills are used inconsistently because ADHD is a condition of inconsistent performance. So if you've ever wondered why sometimes it seems like your child can do a task just fine, but then struggle with it a few days later, and then another few days later they're fine, that's why, because ADHD is inconsistent, which is really confusing for a lot of people. One of the core executive function skills that we don't hear much about is cognitive flexibility. So the ability to be adaptable, to go with the flow, to be able to work collaboratively in groups, to be able to play on the playground cooperatively and engage in imaginative play, to be able to get along with others. All of those things require cognitive flexibility. For many individuals with ADHD, they struggle with cognitive flexibility because, again, ADHD, executive function developmental delay, so therefore their flexibility is behind their same age peers. So when a kid with ADHD, like my son, has a propensity to be highly inflexible, that is often because they are struggling with this executive function skill. On top of that, what often happens in many families of kids with ADHD is that their inflexibility is accommodated by parents. Family accommodation or parental accommodation is when parents change their behavior to alleviate or avoid their child's temporary distress. So as an example, many families will change the way they do things because they don't want to hear the complaining or arguing or oppositional behavior coming from their child who has a propensity to be inflexible. So rather than teaching the child to become more flexible, they become more flexible around the child. As a parent once said to me, the more flexible I became, the more inflexible my son became, because when inflexibility is accommodated, it gets worse over time. That's why I have a saying, flexibility is cultivated, inflexibility is accommodated. So when somebody has a propensity to be inflexible, they are often argumentative as a result of that. The next reason, inconsistent and lagging use of perspective taking skills. Perspective taking is what I call the core social executive function skill. So perspective taking has to do with understanding others' thoughts and feelings and their perspective, and understanding how you're coming across to others. For many kids with ADHD, they struggle with perspective taking. So they have difficulty understanding how they're coming across to others, but they also have difficulty understanding others' points of view, or understanding how maybe somebody else could be right and they're not right. So as a result, many kids with ADHD, as well as adults with ADHD who struggle with inconsistent or lagging use of perspective-taking skills, are often argumentative. One of the places we see this play out the most is on the playground at school. Often elementary schoolers with ADHD who have a propensity to struggle with perspective taking will report to their parents that they're being bullied in school, when in reality, what is likely happening is other kids are not doing exactly what they want them to do, or they're having a negative reaction to the way they're being treated by the child with ADHD. So when they say things like, I'm not gonna play with you anymore, or you're too bossy, well then the child with ADHD gets offended and they think that they're being bullied because they struggle with perspective taking. They're not understanding how they're coming across to their peers. This is also the reason why many kids with ADHD gravitate towards younger kids because they can control the play situation and younger kids have less social expectations, or they gravitate towards adults because if you struggle with perspective taking, an adult is going to stand there and listen to you ramble on about Pokemon or whatever your interest is this week, whereas your same age peers are not going to do that. So many kids with ADHD who have a propensity to be argumentative with their peers because of their difficulty with perspective taking gravitate towards younger kids and gravitate towards adults. If this is your child, I want to suggest to you that you check out the social skills playlist at the ADHD Dude YouTube channel. And I also have a course to help parents learn how to build these social executive function skills like perspective taking, which is part of the ADHD Dude membership site. The course is called Socially Smarter. The next reason people with ADHD can have a propensity to be argumentative is novelty seeking. The ADHD brain likes novelty. They like things new. They get excited by things that are interesting to them. So for many kids with ADHD, arguing is a form of novelty-seeking behavior. They like to see the emotional reaction they can get from somebody, particularly parents or siblings, when they argue with them. Now you might be thinking, well, my child does this constantly, so why is it still a novelty to them if they know the reaction they're going to get from me or if they know the reaction they're going to get from their sibling? Well, often they do this in times when they are feeling bored or they need some mental stimulation. So arguing is a form of mental stimulation for them because they're getting an emotional reaction from somebody, or some might just like arguing because they like to try to debate their points. You know, lots of people like debating things, so that's not unusual and that's not a problem in itself. The problem is when your arguing reaches the point that other people don't want to engage in it, or you're doing it to be provocative because you're bored. That's what novelty-seeking behavior is. I do want to mention that this novelty-seeking behavior, as well as difficulty with perspective taking and inflexibility, those are difficulties that may exist into adulthood for many people with ADHD. And as you can imagine, as we get older, social expectations increase. So adults tend to not have great tolerance for an adult who tends to be argumentative because of their inflexibility or difficulty with perspective taking or their novelty-seeking behavior. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And remember how important it is that we work on these skills now, because we don't want our kids going into adulthood and being off-putting to others because of their argumentativeness as a result of these lagging skills. The final reason kids with ADHD may have a propensity to be argumentative is because the behavior is reinforced with undivided attention and emotional reactivity. Now, we could make the case and say, well, that's exactly what you said before about novelty seeking, but this is a little different, and let me explain why. For many kids with ADHD, they learn that when they argue with parents, they get their parents' undivided attention or they get an emotional reaction from them, and they like attention just like anybody does. And in my experience, and I don't really have any data to back this up, so I'm just sharing my observation, many kids with ADHD need more attention than typically developing kids. So they learn that arguing is a way to get undivided attention, and every time they're arguing is reinforced with attention, well, what they learn is this works. This is why I have a saying I teach parents, particularly those who have a child like my son who has a propensity to be extremely argumentative and oppositional. I teach parents in Scaffolding Better Behavior, my parent behavior training program, to disconnect the power source, meaning you don't have to engage in an argument. You can walk away from it. When you disconnect the power source, what it's teaching your child is that this specific behavior is not going to be rewarded with my attention or my emotional reactivity. Now, sometimes people have a problem with this and they say things like, I want my child to feel heard, or I don't want them to feel ignored. I'm not telling you to ignore your child. What I'm saying is do not give attention to the specific behavior of arguing. Don't engage with it. Disconnect the power source. Furthermore, just because you choose not to engage in your child's arguing, you choose to disconnect the power source, that does not mean that they're not going to feel heard. I am confident that anybody watching this video is a very attentive parent who gives their kids plenty of attention. One thing I always teach parents is that when you disconnect the power source, your child's behavior may get worse before it gets better. Here's the reason why. When you stop giving attention to argumentativeness, that will feel like a loss of control to the child. They will not understand why suddenly what's worked so well in terms of getting your undivided attention and emotional reactivity is no longer working. So they have a propensity sometimes to get more emotionally dysregulated or up the ante, so to speak. So instead of just arguing, when you're not giving attention to the arguing, then they might go into emotional manipulation by saying things like, you're not listening to me, you don't care about me, you never listen to me, or making, self-harm threats, things like that. Kids with ADHD tend to be very good at learning how to emotionally manipulate their parents when they're not getting what they want. Now, if you're thinking right now, well, children can't manipulate, that's impossible. I encourage you to read any child development book. Toddlers can manipulate in an age-appropriate way. It just so happens, in my experience, kids with ADHD become much more resourceful at emotional manipulation of their parents because they quickly learn that it works and it's effective. So keep that in mind as well. If you're looking for strategies that tell you exactly what to do to help reduce the arguing in your home, please check out Scaffolding Better Behavior, the ADHD Dude Parent Behavior Training Program, as well as the Behavior Playlist at the ADHD Dude YouTube channel, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.